at the year called Radio Forecast 2015, What's Hot and What's Not. We're happy to team with Burrell Associates to present this webinar. If you're not familiar with Burrell, Burrell Associates is an advertising analyst firm that provides local market ad data to about 1,100 companies. And that includes companies like Gannett, iHeartMedia, Intercom, Post Newsweek Broadcasting, Shores Communications, and many others. Before I introduce our panelists, I do want to tell you about a must-attend conference on March the 2nd and 3rd in New York. It's Burrell Associates' 7th annual local online advertising conference. That's held at the Grand Hyatt in New York. And Gordon tells me that registrations are about 20% ahead of the past few years. So look for a sold-out event. They can handle 500 people. And details are available at the Burrell website. On the webinar today will be Gray Persons, an award-winning marketing strategist and analyst who worked on the streets in advertising, sales, and as a sales manager for more than a decade. And Gordon Burrell is one of the industry's leading analysts. He's quoted frequently in Inside Radio and in other minor publications like the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Ad Age, and many, many others. Prior to starting Burrell Associates, Gordon was the Vice President for New Media for Landmark Communications, where he worked for 22 years. He started his career originally as a newspaper reporter and editor in Norfolk, Virginia. So thank you again for attending, and let's turn it over to Gordon Burrell.
Thank you, Gene, and thank you, everybody, for being here. Yes, being quoted in Inside Radio is the pinnacle of my career. I thought when the first time my quote appeared there, I could now retire. But great publication. Glad everybody is a subscriber, really helping out the industry. Before we begin, I want to talk a little bit about the conference first, but I want to ask everybody for some help. We're running a survey. We've done a number of years with RAB. We're doing a benchmarking report. You'll see it in a month or so for the radio industry, and everything that's happening in digital. We document it. We show you how much you could be making or how to calculate that, which is actually a part of this presentation. We need a little help on the survey. If you have not taken that survey, it takes about 5-7 minutes, something like that, and seen it promoted through the RAB, please do so. And if you want the link to do the survey, just send us an email to info@burrellassociates.com and just say send survey link, and we'll send you the link. Just takes a few minutes. We need about 100 more responses on that to get it nailed down. But thank you for considering that. Gene mentioned the conference, March 2nd and 3rd, Grand Hyatt, New York. Great conference. We've got more than 500 people. We'll probably be sold out this year. We're way ahead in registrations, and that will occur probably in like mid-February. So sign up. There's a code there for Inside Radio subscribers, Inside 100. Knocks $100 off the price. Hope you can make that. There's the URL if you want the information on the agenda. We got some great people there. In the next 40 minutes, Gray and I are going to go through some, I think, really interesting things that are happening in the media landscape. Some about radio exclusively, the terrestrial part of the business, and some about the digital part. And as you can imagine, there's going to be a lot about digital because it's really still a lot of the buzz. We're going to give you the big picture, some big foundation shifts that are occurring that will help explain what's going on. We're going to talk about this year and what's hot and what's not in 2015. We're going to talk about radio's winners and losers, key categories to watch, and taking action, some recommendations. And we'll leave some time for Q&A. But we wanted to start kind of with the big picture. You know, it's just kind of crazy out there. We're going to weave the Alice in Wonderland theme through this whole thing. Somebody challenged me to try to do that, and it was pretty easy, actually. It'd be so nice if something made sense for a change, and we're going to try to make sense of it for you with the big picture and some of the big foundation shifts that are occurring. If you look back, all of this crap that's going on today has happened before. Look back in 1949. Radio was doing just fine and then started losing share when the new medium of the day, television, came along. Cable came along, and until then, television had been doing just fine, that red line, and then television kind of got shaky in terms of share and began to decline. The next disruptor was the Internet, and then the disruptor after that is mobile, which really is just a shift in platforms, a shift from 8-track tapes to cassettes, for instance, and that's why you see that big decline in the orange line in terms of Internet, which we would call stationary Internet media advertising. versus mobile. And mobile really is taking over. It's now more than 50% of a lot of local media websites. But this stuff has happened over time. A more interesting or tectonic thing that's happened recently is this. And this chart really does explain a lot. And you'll see sort of a theme in the presentation today that really plays to what's happened here. In 2007, those lines crossed. Local advertising and local promotions. More spent on promotions than on advertising in that year for the very first time. And by the way, this happened on national advertising a few years earlier. Local always lags national when new things occur. It happens down at the local markets a little bit later. But what's really going on here is that this is the big picture stuff. Classic advertising is flattening. This should not be in a sloping down red dotted line. In 2014, businesses spent $104 billion. That was 22% less than they had spent 9 years earlier. And even this year, when we look at our forecast for 2015, about $110 billion, it's still below what it was in 2005. There's a little slight rise, but it is not rising back or bouncing back to where it should be. So advertising is flattening. That is not really good. Everything from newspapers to radio to television isn't quite what it used to be. They've lost some of their muchness. And the reason for it is this is happening. What's happening is advertisers are spending a lot more on promotions, which is marketing, and I'll define it more granularly in a minute, but it's not classic advertising. So from 25 to 2014, they're spending 73% more. This is phenomenal. It's starting to flatten a little, so the lines aren't diverging as much. But all of a sudden, it seems, since about 2007, here comes this huge expenditure. What's happening, and this really is key to kind of understanding everything, is that the advertisers have the medium at their disposal. They're disintermediating you. They now can put specials and coupons and store hours and inventory and all kinds of information about products on their own website, which, by the way, can be accessed directly by consumers. They don't have to put that message, or at least they think they don't, in media anymore. So I got to tell you, promotions are huge. It's coupons, discounts, rebates, contests, events, sponsorships, signage, printing. All of this goes into not advertising but marketing expenditures. And it's also digital marketing, which includes website design and hosting and social media management, search engine optimization, ad placement fees, email management, managing all this marketing stuff. We're not making up these numbers. It's right in IRS tax records. When you look at how much people are spending on marketing versus advertising, it is huge. This, I'm telling you, this is where the money is. You've got to really take a close look at this, and this is why we're so enthusiastic about radio and the radio industry, because they know promotions better than any other media. They're just fantastic at it. So there's great, great opportunity here, but you really have to understand what's happening is that the advertisers believe they have the medium at their disposal and can go direct to consumers. They don't need you anymore. The deer have the guns. Got the picture? Okay, that was photoshopped in there. That's not a real picture. So the way we describe it, if you can think of it this way, you know how costly it is to run a media company? It's not that you just have this big printing press or you have a transmitter or distribution of some sort. You have to come up with content. These companies are finding that they really need to come up with their programming. They need to increase their ratings, if you want to think of it that way. And every single day they're having to come up with some type of news programming to put out there on their Facebook page or on their Twitter feed or on their website or push out via email to get business in. It's kind of like a news production cost that they have. So this is their form of breaking news, is to get all these specials out. And they're spending huge amounts of money on it. When you look at companies that are meeting this need, guys recognize any of these? If I showed you logos for Entercom or Delmarva Broadcasting or Hubbard Radio or South Central Radio in Tennessee, you might recognize them. These are the same companies. So I'm going to pop over to the web for just a second and show you how these companies are kind of meeting those needs. This is Delmarva Broadcasting in Delmarva, Virginia, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia area. This is DBC Interactive, and look what these guys are selling. Of course, they're internet platforms, which everybody is selling, website, graveyard for logos and things like that, but they've also selling into a digital ad network, so your ad can appear in this market all over the place, and other websites, not just the radio station websites, and they sell that service. They do business websites, they do video advertising, they also do audio advertising. Smart Reach Digital, which is Entercom's play. Look what they're offering. They're offering one-stop solutions, digital analysis, website strategies, search engine optimization, search engine marketing. So this is how they are meeting that need. This is Hubbard in Cincinnati, expanding it to other stations. It's a creative digital agency. This is South Central, small radio group just acquired by another group, and they're offering all kinds of digital services as well. So that's how some radio brethren of yours, and let me tell you, it's happening throughout the newspaper industry and the television industry as well. We're seeing a lot of these agencies created, how they're meeting that promotions need. So we're going to talk and move into, by the way, you're going to get into the next couple slides a whole lot of data. We're going to give you a URL at the end of this presentation where you can download the PowerPoint if you wish and take a closer look at it. Or print it out and burn it if you wish. So let's take a look at 2015 and what's happening in 2015. I'm going to ask Ray to help me out on some of this. This is our forecast change in local ad spending. And everybody is going to rivet on to that little 2.6% and say, wow, we're okay. Which is interesting. You are. We don't know if that'll be up 1% or down 1%, but it's not going to be down 5%, not going to be up 10%. More likely it's going to be up 2 to 3%, we think. And there's a good reason for that. We're going to get into that in a moment. But there is secular erosion for all of print media. That's newspapers, other print, which are basically magazines and alternative news weeklies, and directories and direct mail. Big erosion in those companies, and you ought to be going after those advertisers because you have a medium that's fairly strong, and you also have digital at your disposal, which is really eroding these other media pretty quickly. And there's some secular or cyclical erosions in television and outdoor, primarily political and some sports. But that's what we see happening. We see the erosion in newspapers continuing, slowing down just a little bit, but more of the erosion we think in the future is going to occur with video, particularly with television. There's a lot going on. We could do a whole webinar on that, but going after TV advertisers has become pretty much in vogue in the industry. This is how $104 billion last year in local advertising was shared. So you can see that online is 33% of all advertising, the biggest share of everything. But an interesting fact is everybody, radio, newspapers, the Yellow Pages guys, etc., are selling digital advertising as well to their customer base. So the interesting fact is traditional media controls half of all digital advertising. So still they control about 3/4 or more of all advertising because they're selling quite a bit of digital in the marketplace. So that's kind of an overall picture. What we wanted to do is also take a closer look at digital and what's hot and what's not. In the overall share of the different formats, we have display targeted, which is basically banner ads, display ROS, which is run of site, or untargeted banner ads, paid search, email, video, and audio. So I was really interested to sit in on a radio presentation at a broadcasters meeting in a state that will go nameless, and they had a session. This is what I wanted to sit in on all of our competitors in digital. They were going to talk about the competitors in digital and what they can learn from that. And do you know that that entire 45 minutes was taken up by discussing Pandora? And I was so disappointed because if you look at all of these shares of advertising, look how big the audio streaming portion is. So really shouldn't be obsessing. And I know Pandora sells, it's a great company, and they're selling lots of stuff, much more than just audio advertising. But in all the surveys that we've seen, we do a lot of SMB surveys, we don't see anybody asking for audio advertising, streaming audio advertising. It's just not big to them. So when we look at what's hot and what's not in 2015, the bars on the right show the 2014 levels by format of local digital advertising, audio, email, banners, paid search, video, and targeted banners, and show you what's hot, which is targeted banners. That's double. If you're selling run-of-site banners, people really don't care anymore. They want them targeted. What's also hot is video, and this is going to continue to get really, really big. That went up. It's going up 50% this year as we switch more to kind of an interactive television screen, I guess, as opposed to words and pictures on a website. It's becoming much more video-centric, and video is what every advertiser really wants. They want a video commercial or spot of themselves. So those are two very hot categories going forward in 2015. What's not are these. There's still some audio out there, not much. Email advertising, not much. Banners, untargeted, and paid search, but paid search is actually beginning to decline, we think, in the next couple of years. You can see last year it was $7 billion, and this year it's 6.6. And so all that stuff that Google sells, and other people are selling for Google, in terms of just paid search advertising, is actually now in decline. It's kind of out of vogue. So radio's winners and losers. Let's take a look at what's going on in the marketplace. These are the top 20 growth categories for terrestrial radio. This is not digital. This is radio, audio, advertising, and this is percentage growth. What fuels these numbers, you should know, are a couple of things. One is surveys that we do that where advertisers tell us that they're increasing or decreasing spend or planning to do so. They don't always do what they say they're going to do, but it's a good barometer. And the other, probably more significant thing, is growth, as reported by BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, and other organizations, showing what categories are growing and increasing an employee base and likely increasing their advertising as well. It's a very, very accurate way to forecast what's going to happen with advertising as these businesses grow. So everybody's going to focus on contractors and building, going up 18.3%. Cable and other paid TV services, beauty salons, these are the percentage increases. When we look at the dollar increases, you don't see them even in the top 20 because there's certainly a lot more building going on and contractors looking to advertise and probably looking to radio, but it's not large in terms of dollar volume. The greater dollar volume, of course, is in general merchandise stores. There's more of them. They spend more, but they're only up 2.9%. But look at that. That's about a $130 million increase in radio spending we're forecasting this year. Even with automotive, about a $38 million increase at 5.2% this year. Pharmacies, government, etc. So these are the top 20 in terms of the advertising expenditures, total revenue. And then right next to it is the percentage of increase. The cable and the other paid television down toward the bottom did make the list. That is a bona fide hot category. They are in steep competition with Netflix and other services, and they do find radio, and they're also finding digital as well as a very viable means of advertising. So there's a hot tip for you. The top 20 retreaters for radio in 2015, these are the biggest dollar declines and their forecast percentage decline. Credit and mortgage services down 4.9%, travel services. And Gray, I'm going to ask you, you have this information, you're a radio manager. What do you do with this type of information? Is it going to decrease, credit and mortgage customers for radio 4.9% this year? And, what do you do with that type of information?
Well, the first thing to recognize is that this is really barometric, and so the actual increase or decrease will vary depending upon market and depending upon cluster. But what it is a barometric of mood. So, for instance, those folks in the credit and mortgage service being down, they're probably going to be less inclined to be happy to speak to you than someone who is in an industry that is forecasting a lot of growth in radio. Those are going to be much better discussions. So as a manager, I'd focus on optimizing growth from those in which we see growth, and for those that are losing, it's really about retaining it. And the way to do that is to look at the other media that they're forecasting decrease in spend against. Ask them how those media are going. Ask them how ads are going in those media. And take what they give you and tell you to leverage to sell them other stuff, specifically digital in many cases. So that would really be how I'd use this information to help me as a manager to focus on my opportunities.
Great. Let's keep going and let's take a look at these key categories.
Sounds good. So, Gordon, earlier you referenced the forecasted increase in employee base and how that impacts net spend, and you can certainly see that happening with auto sales with a fairly large increase in projected net spend. When we look more specifically at digital, what we see is that we're forecasting a large increase there. And that is really a result of manufacturers pushing dealers to digital. You know, they've built these sort of lead distribution channels. They've spent a lot of money there, and they want to continue to grow those and leverage those. The way they're doing that is leveraging co-op fund reimbursement, and we're seeing that really impact video. So co-op funds that were being used to cover TV commercials are going into online video to a large degree. Now, in terms of radio, earlier, Gordon, you sort of discussed the importance of promotions, and radio is an incredibly strong promotional player. We know, based on our surveys, that auto dealers are bullish on radio, and so we see that as really buoying radio in the near term.
I also mentioned that in automotive, we've seen at least one study out of New York that showed if you optimize your channel, we see these all the time. They're funded by some of the big digital companies, Google or Yahoo or whomever, try to affect some advertising their way or shake money out of the trees, saying, boy, if you took a little money out of, and early on, 15 years ago, they would say, if you took a little money out of newspapers and put it in digital, look at the brand lift you would get, or sales volume increase, etc. Now they're saying if you take a little money out of television and put it into digital, and the survey that we saw said, and if you put a little more into radio, because radio tends to be fairly inexpensive and you do need some broadcast support for what you're doing. So we think this is affecting the industry as well. Advertisers need some level of mix. Radio is inexpensive. It serves some of their needs. It drives, as you'll see in a moment, digital traffic, which is everybody's goal. It combines with what Gray said, and that is this huge drive for down to all the dealerships to increase their digital spending to participate in the manufacturer's co-op program. Ford now requires you to spend 50% of your total ad spend if you're a Ford franchise dealer. 50% of your total ad spend in digital. So they're scrambling to buy digital and they're adjusting the dials. Gray, what about healthcare?
Well, healthcare, of course, is another hot category. And when we look at what's occurring in digital in healthcare, we see that that drive towards video is really impacting this category as well, with a lot of dollars being taken out of television and being moved into video. So that's a great opportunity for radio clusters and stations that have video opportunities on their sites and can sell it elsewhere. In terms of radio, again, we see fairly bullish on radio, and that will also be buoyed by the ability of radio to drive digital traffic, specifically as it comes into play in, say, social. Social is very important for referrals. That's an area also that healthcare are very hot on. And so the ability for radio to drive social activity is an important value proposition for radio to leverage moving forward. It could result in some growth. In terms of home improvement, Home improvement, with housing picking up some, we're seeing obviously greater health there overall after a few tough years. When we look at digital, really digital, we're seeing movement out of primarily directories and print into a lot of targeted display. So, selling targeted display is going to be an important opportunity in this category. In terms of radio, it's again relatively flat, maybe not as large as some of the other categories.
Political advertising is another one we wanted to address. There's not a huge amount of movement here in digital, although we'll show you in a moment that digital is fast growing, but it's still relatively small. There's not a lot to talk about in 2015. It's an odd year, so there's not a lot of elections. There's some local elections out there and some small district elections. So there's the change that we see from 2014 to 2015, a decline by $2 billion. But when you take a look at radio from 2014 to 2016, the presidential year, a pretty significant shift, and a shift in share. The share in 2014 was 5.8%, and we're looking at a shift up to 8.8% share of all political advertising. So that's pretty darn strong. Look at online. Online is less than radio, less than $1 billion in 2016, and less than 8% share. So political is just an area where online really hasn't made much in terms of inroads. It's still a very, very video-centric medium, very, very video-centric advertising category. So things have changed. Another Alice in Wonderland quote. You can't go back to yesterday because I was a different person then. But some cool stuff for you. And this is stuff that you ought to be telling your advertisers. You talk about digital and, everybody gets crazy on digital and everything is digital and, what about radio? Well, online has a greater what? There's online, 82%, television 37%, radio 30%. What do you think that is? This is the percentage of people who ignore ads. 82% of the people online ignore the frickin' ads. Even for social media, banner ads, search ads, higher than traditional media. So go ahead, thumb your nose. There you go. You got a medium where people pay more attention to the ads. What about media's reach? What do you think that 94% is? And 52% and 86%. Radio. Radio has a greater reach when you count up everybody. These are great slides to show some of your advertisers, showing radio's strength. Don't delude them. Don't show them all kinds of slides about how radio is better than everything else, because it's not. But there are some strengths about radio that they need to know. Even if you look at the 18 to 34-year-olds, you think, oh, well, only old people are listening to radio. Even 18 to 34-year-olds are still listening to radio at a terrific rate. How about this one from Triton Digital? I'd be very disappointed if you took away, what do you think the blue bar is and the gray bar? My favorite radio station versus Facebook. So people have these really strong affinities for radio. A great social media study taking a look at newspapers and magazines and radio and television and cable gauged how much interaction each of the programs aired or printed in those media got on Facebook and Twitter. They looked at the number of commentators or commenters, content likers, photo, video, posters, hashers, repliers, retweeters, etc. And take a look at this. Broadcast really kicked butt. The star indicates the highest performance for local TV in a couple of those key categories. And if we look at radio just by itself, the blue are Facebook and the light blue are Twitter. Didn't do so great on Twitter. Did okay, but indexed lower than all other media, but indexed higher in 3 categories. And comments on Facebook and multiple likes and likes. So radio really does drive quite a bit of not only social media traffic, but website traffic. And that's one of the key goals of local advertisers. In all the studies that we see, their number 1, 2, 3 source of new customers are word of mouth and professional or customer referrals and their own website. And their own website could be Facebook. If you have the medium that drives the traffic, to their own website, which they consider one of their top 3 sources of new customers, you got it. And this proves it right there. So
Gordon?
this is something I can really get excited about when it comes to radio. Of
Gordon,
all social media, radio drives the most likes, multiple likes, and multiple comments on Facebook. Was there a question?
If I could I've just got one quick thing, and that is from a management perspective. All of this money that's being invested in digital, radio is the key to activating that investment. You're the digital activator, and that is the value proposition I take to market. Back to you, Gordon.
Thank you. So let me wind down a little bit. We're going to leave a little bit of time here at the end for questions, which you'll be able to type in. And again, the URL for this presentation will be displayed at the end of this presentation. The hottest digital stuff that's going on today are store beacons. If you don't know what a beacon is, Google it, go find it. There are iBeacons, there are other type of beacons, about the size of a hockey puck. It gets stuck in a store, operates on a dime-sized battery that runs for 3 years, and it pings out by a low-power Bluetooth little signal to a cell phone. So what? So what? These beacons are driving coupons to people's cell phones. If you opt into a weather app from a television station, for instance, or a news app, or you guys have some apps for your radio stations, and people have said, yeah, it's okay for me to, for you to know what my location is and to send me an alert or a notice on something. You have the ability to send that person a coupon if they get in the vicinity of that store. A small company in North Carolina has been doing this testing for the past 3 months with 90 television stations with phenomenal results, driving coupons to people's phones. In some cases, 80% of the people who get that little ping come into the store, and 60% buy. That is phenomenal. Early results, it's probably going to even out. We've got that person coming and speaking at our conference in March. Find out more about beacons. It's huge, and you guys could be at the center of this. Promotions, games, contests, native advertising, all of that is really hot, especially native advertising or writing stories for your customers that look more like stories than they do advertising. All these integrated digital solutions, you're going to see more and more digital agencies pop up. Take a look at the ones that I showed you earlier. You're also going to see quite a few of them shut down. We've seen that happen before. The companies don't believe that there's profit in them. They're not ready for long-term investment of them. It doesn't look like the business that they're in, and so we do see some of them shut down. But they're a long-term proposition. We think they're going to be around for a while. Anything involving video. Anything. Get involved in that. Get onto YouTube, start searching for stuff, and you'll begin seeing local video pre-roll pop up. Somebody is selling that. You could sell that as well. The other video that you should take a look at is go to youtube.com/yellowpages. And in the black search bar, not the YouTube search bar, but the Yellow Pages search bar. This is YP, the Yellow Pages company. Type in your market name, and you'll begin to see these 90-second, 2-minute videos from advertisers in your market, which run for $3,000 to $5,000 a piece. That's another form of video advertising. So, quick recommendations: get buy-in from above. You can't do this otherwise. You can come up with all kinds of great ideas and pursue them, and you go, wow, let's create a digital agency, but unless you get buy-in from above, and I mean real buy-in, it's not going to fly. It'll get folded. You should gauge your market potential. What are you chasing? $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $4 million, $5 million, $20 million? So figure out how big is big, the type of money that you're chasing. Don't just chase after the next new thing. I'd craft a powerful story of radio and digital. We gave you some of the components of it here, but your advertisers really are looking for a great story. They are confused. I could do a whole presentation around how confused they are. Gray can tell you how confused they are. You think you're confused by all this stuff? Go talk to the poor guy trying to sell HVAC services to somebody. He doesn't know whether he'll put his money in radio or Yellow Pages or Angie's List or the local newspaper or what. It's your job to educate them, and you can't do that unless you give them a really good and powerful and compelling story. Hire digital-only staffers. If you don't, you are flatlined. Your company will never grow again. I could do another whole presentation on this. If you hire, we just did a report on this. It's our fourth time doing this report. Companies that hire digital-only staffers, people just concentrating on the digital opportunity, make 4 times as much digital revenue per rep for all their reps. It's phenomenal. I can't emphasize that more. I know a lot of people scoff at that, but in fact there has been pretty significant increase in the radio industry. Just a year ago, 11% of radio stations had digital-only sellers. In our latest survey, 38% had. So if you don't have them, looks like your colleagues are beginning to understand what is driving new revenue. And the other is, don't try to figure it out all yourself. You got to start somewhere. In the spirit of Lewis Carroll, begin at the beginning and go until you come to the end, and then stop. Quick story for you. We're going to open it up for questions. You can begin typing them in now. We've got about 9 minutes for questions. 100 years ago, blacksmiths were kind of in the same position that you were in. They were looking at their customers out there, not riding horses anymore, maybe not listening to radio as much anymore, doing other things in the car. And they said, you know what, we're not in the business of putting shoes on horses and fixing carriages. We're in the business of servicing the transportation needs of these people. So they began converting these blacksmith shops. They put up gas pumps, and they started servicing vehicles. What a great lesson. This guy in Queens, New York, Farrington's, had this horseshoe blacksmith shop, and where that white horse is standing right there is where I'm standing right there. So if you Google SlideShare Burrell, you will get this page. Watch that video. It's 2 minutes and 50 seconds, and it explains what's going on, I think, in a way that's really going to help your company. Watch it first, take it to the owner. If you're the owner, watch it twice. But it really does give you an idea of how you can transform your company. There's another video you really ought to see. If any of you know Dave Morgan, bright guy, that little white screen down there is a video with Dave talking about his view of the future, which is really dramatic and involves a huge transformation of media companies 5 to 10 years from now. That's kind of cool to watch as well. So there's the URL for download, to download the deck. Again, if any of you can participate in that survey I mentioned, just send an email to info@burrellassociates.com, and we'll send you the link to the survey. To download this deck, just type in that URL. It's available now. You can download it and enjoy it at your leisure. Brittany, how are we doing on questions?
We have one question as of now. What is the best approach to determine how much of a budget should be allocated to radio versus digital?
That's a good question for Greg. I suppose it means the allocation for an individual advertiser. Greg?
Well, there are a few ways. I'll tell you, one way is to have a good sense for how the industry tends to behave. And by understanding how the industry tends to behave, and there are various sources of information that can provide that, we know that, you're able to provide that as context for how it is that how it is that a specific advertiser is spending their money. That's generally the way that I see as being the best. Dollars follow success, and so broadly, the way that an industry spends money tends to be a great indicator of what's working. By understanding how an industry spends across the mix of media, you can then use that sort of proportionality and marry it to specific advertisers.
So let me jump in on that, Greg. So if overall, and this is overall guidance, local advertisers are spending 30% of their budgets on digital. I think it's 33% of their total ad budget on digital. Then that's kind of good for everybody. However, it's not, because if you look at real estate, and I guess if any of you are interested, see the URL or the number down there, call that number or send an email to that URL, and Greg can actually jump in and show you in your market for any specific category, furniture store, taxidermist, HVAC guys, whatever, how they're spending their money. For real estate agents, they spend 75% of their ad budget in digital on average. Car dealers, 55% of their ad budget on digital. HVAC, 17%. Restaurants, about 29, 35%, depending on the type of restaurant that it is. chain or a small individual restaurant. So that was a really long answer to that question, and I hope we got close to answering it.
Okay, the questions are starting to come in. Any questions that we do not get to, we will respond to you personally. The last question I think we have time for is, how should radio sales associates encourage existing sponsors to change spot copy to drive more listeners to the sponsor's website?
Oh, that's great. That is a great question. I think it's all in telling the story. The attention span, give them the book called Distracted and read it yourself. There's a great story in how people are so distracted that they tune out very, very quickly. They hear something once, or twice, and that's it. They get it, and they tune out very, very quickly. People don't see or don't hear things. It's so important that frequency is important, so you got to kind of hit people with the same message, but you also have to get them to hear it kind of in a different way, because people are on sensory overload. Think of all the things that you do. I wish I could look into your individual computers right now to see how many of you people were listening to this extremely important webinar, but also checking your email or texting someone. We are all multitasking. So getting your message changed with great frequency, don't change it every single time, I think you can play into, well, we're in a very distracted society and people need to hear something fresh a little more frequently. I think that really helps, and sort of play on their own habits. Everybody is multitasking, and when you multitask, you really need things coming at you from a couple of different angles before you respond to it once.
Okay, do we have time for one more?
We have 3 minutes, actually, 2.5.
Okay, how do you see podcast growth impacting radio over the next 5 years?
Wow. I don't. I'm struggling. I don't really think it's going to impact radio all that much. I really, really don't. I do think that, podcast is just sort of another name for recorded music, which people have been getting on cassettes or on 8-track tapes or on iPod Nanos or, portable CD players, whatever era you're in, for years. And it really hasn't impacted radio. I think what you have to understand, if you're in the business, is your unique value proposition. What makes you different from a basic podcast? And that is, I don't know about you, but I have a different sense of what's coming out over the radio in my car from a local station right now than I do listening to something that's recorded. Pandora, which I think is great, and Spotify is great, and everything else, I want to disconnect from to connect to reality. So I think they don't really compete. We've had that type of competition, podcast competition, for years. I don't think it competes all that much because radio is a differentiated product. It's live, it's here, it's now, it's got traffic. Can't podcast traffic reports. It's got weather, it's got important information, so I think it's a differentiated product. And I just took up an entire minute. I think we can do one quick question, then we turn it over to Jean.
Okay, digital is an impression-based sell. Radio is not. How do we compare reach and frequency, or is that not possible?
I'm not sure that digital is an impression-based sale. Digital is far more complicated, and I think if you look at digital that way, you might want to shake your head back and forth very, very fast about 100 times to try to dispel the old media traditional notion out of when it comes to digital media. It's a lot more complicated and a lot more interactive. I think you have to look at digital media as an advertising utility, not an advertising medium. Radio is an advertising medium. It reaches people. You've got to reach people over and over again. That's the frequency part of it. You've got to reach a certain amount of people, queue them up to whatever audience you're looking for. And digital it's a bit different. It's kind of a utility. And I think putting the two together creates sort of a great, powerful marketing effort, as opposed to try to comparing the two and say they compete with each other. I think the days, honestly, of seeing the internet as a medium that will have supported by banner ads and audio commercials, where we all think, wow, that's really stupid, is coming pretty soon. In fact, there are an awful lot of people who think that. Remember when we thought the internet was an advertising medium and we put advertising messages on it? It's much more complicated than that. So that's all we have time for. If you had questions, you type them in. We'll get to them by email. Gene, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Hey, I want to thank everybody for that. Thanks for a very interesting presentation, Gray and Gordon. And for more stories and research to help you grow your station and group, turn to Inside Radio's Must Read Monday. And thanks for reading Inside Radio, too.
Thank you, everybody. Gene, thanks for having us. Everybody have a great day.
Bye.
Please stay on the line because we have a survey, so don't disconnect. So take the survey. Let us know how we did. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Gray.
Thank you.